Master Sergeant Hahn, Operational Log Update. While en route to begin anti-piracy operations within the Wild Realms, Navi has detected some unusual readings. Therefore, we have stopped to investigate, finding some debris and mostly empty space. The unusual readings appear to have come from a damaged exclusion drive, which we found spinning and sputtering alone in empty space. I have dispatched the little ones to take their prospectors to analyze the debris and recover any wreckage. We should be back on our way shortly, as this is just an empty patch of space, no less than 2 light years from the nearest system. Lacking a trail of wreckage or apparent energy trails to follow, it seems likely whatever happened took place here, in its totality. We'll be scanning the area and seeing if the wreckage can be identified. Then we'll cog the data and debris back to whoever it belonged to. There tends to be a modest finder's fee, even if no owner can be found. And free funds are the best funds after all. End update. As I finished the log entry, Lieutenant Spawns walked into my office. "Sarge, the scans." He handed me the info tome and I looked over the data. Found that the exclusion drive was a very poor and low-grade model. Perhaps some pre-Age of Stars transport, maybe an in-system hopper. Fairly risky to try an interstellar trip with something like that, especially this far from any of the Silver Realms, but stranger things have been done. There was a distinct lack of identifying markings, both on the exterior on the drive and, more strangely, the internal components. Any thoughts, LT? While he was a master of keeping his facial expression in check, I could tell he had something to add. Well, there are some strange energy patterns, both on the exterior and what would have been the mounting points, both seeming to be from different sources. I looked at the relevant data and saw he was of course correct. Can't find any matches for the patterns on the exterior of the drive, but the ones near the mount seem to be the result of sabotage. I raised an eyebrow, curious. It looks like someone wired the main power into either the framing or the hull, perhaps both. Maybe in some attempt at a cheap and dirty isolation or jamming system at best. At worst, this is deliberate sabotage. But the stress and the energy patterns are clear, unlike the other. Looking again, I was pleased to see that time had done nothing to dull the LT's edge. Agreed, Lieutenant. The other pattern could just be hull wash from whatever impacted the vessel. There's too little data to tell. Any luck on an identification? Negative, sir. I grunted. I still wasn't used to him sirring me. And the wise-ass smile of his never helped much either. Then link up with Nav. I handed him back the tome. Have him perform a 1 light-year area scan and attach it to that. Then cog it and the wreckage to the hunters. Next, I want to be back on route and on schedule as soon as possible. We had bigger affairs to attend to, and there wasn't anything else we could do here. Sir, yes, sir. You got it, Sarge. By the 9 and 4, welcome back to the library, and this, our first episode of our second series of Intro to the Realms, where today, we're going to be taking a look at how the Realms passes information from place to place. Again, as I am sure you are well aware by now, my perceptive patrons, this will be just an introduction and a brief overview of the various ways the Realms communicate. Now, with that out of the way, let us begin with the most regularly and commonly used method, that of the cog. The cognati and cog space they allow access to forms the core of inter-realm communication and, as mentioned before, transport. Raw data, such as letters and other works, can be sent at speeds far surpassing the already rapid rate of travel normally possible with cog space. This allows for rapid and, in some cases, real-time interstellar communication within the civil realms or any properly equipped ships out there amongst the stars. Small amounts of goods are also able to be sent at similar but slightly slower speeds, still reaching orders of magnitude faster than any other similarly accessible or affordable method. The primary drawback to the use of the cog is the limited amount of the essential cognite needed for the construction of the needed devices, while needing nearly none in comparison to even a cog drive. And cog drives and gates can be used for the same use, it should be noted. Each device still requires this slow to produce and very rare material. This forces centralization of cog-based communication to major cities or other places of interest, where an existing cog gate or other cog system already exists. From there, conveyance of packages or letters will be handled locally or via one of the other more available methods. The sun rose over the horizon, and with it brought warmth to the still early spring air. I looked out from the top of our observation tower, built onto the main house, and over the results of the combined efforts of all here. The fields were still bare, of course, but they were due to be planted over the next several weeks, but they stretched for miles. On the far side, I could see the towers of the first of the 4 walls that protected the lands that we had chosen to lay claim and control of, extending to a near full 10 miles from where I stood and ringed by the walls. There was safety and security from the increasingly common dangers that made their home within the wildlands. I was pulled from my thoughts when I saw a wagon approaching. It bore the flag of the local couriers convent, traveling from town to town, delivering messages and goods, at no cost beyond simple food and shelter, as well as neutrality in all matters political. I made my way down and managed to get to the porch just as the wagon had turned and started to leave, having left its delivery with Og and the large carrier drone that had the package, a large piece itself, already on board. What in the name of the V's? Og? Who's this for? Package is not for us. I was a bit confused. Then who? Nov? The praetor that acted as a free-roaming security patrol out amongst the lands we were beginning to offer assistance and protection to, he used Farmhold as his northern base of operations, and would now be busy preparing for his next outing. Correct. Shall I deliver the package myself, or would you prefer to do so, Lord Cathian? No, go ahead. I have a meeting with the elders of the southern villages to prepare for. Do me a favor, ask Nov to see me after you drop that off. I turned around and entered the house, and refilled my cow, and made myself busy with the routine of preparing for the busy day. A few minutes later, Nov practically burst through my front door. Cathian, forgive my lack of manners, but I am in need of a favor. This was new. Nov had never asked for a favor. Sure, what can I help you with? I need to take that package and deliver it. Normally I would have just sent it back with the next CC wagon, but I do not have the time. Could I possibly use your Trebucom to make the necessary arrangements? Of course, just cover the fees. That's not even a favor. Nov had never lacked for coin, and had never let us give him anything, always at a bare minimum insisting that he covered the material costs. Thank you, Lord Captain. After that, I will be happy to help you discuss the issues to our south. I have some information on that. The next most common long-range rapid communication method used by the realms is that of the commonly known Trebucom. As described in a previous entry, these devices use magical means to send their contents to another of their kind. With a built-in receptacle to accept the requisite fee, the Trebucom allows packages and missives about the size of a normal screw tube or less to be sent nearly instantly to any other Trebucom, anywhere within the realms. It is of note that while existing far before the advent of the Cognati and Cogspace, the use of the Trebucom has adapted well to the additional framework that the Cog provides. It is far cheaper to send a letter to a local Cog station for further transit than to pay to send directly to a Trebucom from one end of the realms to the other. Smaller villages will even have a community Trebucom and will send missives in a bulk method, all to ease the costs to everybody in the community. However, there are of course personal and house Trebucoms, although these tend to either be signs of wealth, power, or other importance, or perhaps necessity. I strode with determination as I entered into the lab. Floating in the air, being scanned and examined, was maybe a 10-foot long tube shaped item, 3 foot, 4 foot across, maybe. It looked like an exterior drive for transport, and was my reason for being here. Smoke! You're here. The man at the controls looked over and nodded. Yes, and I am hoping that you can tell me something. That I can do, Smoke, and I can confirm it matches the records you've provided. This is the vessel you think it is, or at least was part of it. What's so important about it? What about the readings off the hull? I ignored the question. It wasn't nearly as important as what destroyed the vessel in question. Are we sure it wasn't a disruptite? The look of fury the question elicited was why I was here in person. I wouldn't insult the man by saying it over a comm link. The man himself turned and crossed the distance to stand in front of me as fast as I would have been likely to be able to do myself. Smoke, you are well aware that that danger was negated some time ago by my son. Are you challenging his word? You know better than that. But explain the readings. And explain the fact that the vessel was carrying someone who had just been released by the ancient empire after suspected espionage. His fury vanished and his mind began to process what I had just said, and he looked at me with a dead glare. The Praetor. The new hunter who got the intel from the archives. I merely nodded. Yes, and I was the one who picked up the intel from him and told him to wait safe and sound for pickup. The EDF were supposed to meet up with him 3 days later. He took a long moment to consider his words, then just silently went back to the console and worked at its control for a few moments. He looked up. No, it was not a disruptite. His voice held a tone that I had learned to fear, even from the time he was a young child when he would sneak out of his elven finishing school to make merriment with his siblings and friends. He had always been able to have that tone of impending dread. What then? An Antani shard. That is what struck the vessel. With no trace of the rest of it, it's reasonable to assume that it was a near foe speed impact. You're lucky to have found this at all. Antani Shard? That is a far more serious problem than disruptites. My host nodded and inclined his head toward the booth at the lab's side. Secure comm station, Smoke. Go ahead, do what you need to do. The last majorly available communication method is that of Chrystech, and stretches anywhere from small units that can only communicate for a few miles with each other, to those that can be used to talk from one side of a star system to another, and even further still. Of course, there are a variety of methods employed by the various styles of communication devices that are crafted amongst the realms using Chrystech. Most use some form of metaphysical medium for their functions. These mediums and how they are used explain for many of the limitations and features of the various units created. It should also be noted, however, that even with Chrystech, save for the occasional real-time communication, there is almost never an active signal network of any kind being used within Realms technology, and this is a safety feature. The Realms know full well how such systems can not only serve to pass along information, but attacks. Thus, with these three main systems overlapping and supplemented with the various forms of magic and other tricks developed by individuals within the realms, information can flow freely and the various sovereignties can conduct themselves with confidence that they are acting on current news and details, all while the common person can keep in touch with one another in a reliable and affordable manner. Now, I do hope you've had an excellent holiday season and are ready to face the new year. With all that said, and before we finish off the first entry of not only the new year, but of Series 2 of Intro to the Realms, I want to thank you for your time and attention. As always, I have been the Recorder, and by the 9 and 4, my perceptive patrons, until you next visit the library, be well. Take care of yourselves and each other. Dragging myself up the sands of the beach I have found myself washed up on. Finally free of the water's cold grip, I rolled on my back and looked up. Dark clouds filled the darkening sky and made any attempt to determine my location null and void. Sitting up, I could see over the horizon, still lit in the fading light of the oncoming dusk, a large trail of smoke rising high into the sky. That must be where the transport ended up crashing. Just at a glance, it was at least 20 or more miles of open water from here to the source of that smoke trail. And while oarcloth made for excellent defensive clothing, it did not lend itself to the aquatic arts of swimming. I looked to my side to see Trano snoring softly. Having fallen into the water after blinking us out of the rapidly crashing ship, he had saved our lives without a doubt, but it had taken his toll on him, and I had to carry him the last bit to the shore after he had passed out. Our vessel had been hit by something that came out of nowhere, though the limited sensors on the transport may have missed a planet. By the time I made it to the console to assess the situation, we were already being pulled into the gravity well of this planet. I had not recalled there being any systems in the vicinity. But that matters little, as we are here now. Tranos had managed to save us, and I had managed to gather and collect most of our supplies before we blinked out. All except the CogCom I had installed in preparation for meeting up with the EDF in a few days. That would be in the central console of the vessel. Now, at the end of that smoke trail, far over the horizon, in a smoldering crater most likely, was the only hope I had to get rescued.